Hello and welcome to my Thyroid Labs walkthrough for women with Hashimoto's. My name is Sarah Brooks. I'm a qualified nutritional therapist, autoimmune protocol coach, and Hashimoto specialist. And that's because I have Hashimoto's. I've had it for the last 10 years, and I spent the first 2 to 3 years putting it into remission. I now help other women do the same. So I offer a free Thyroid Labs guide to all of my clients and followers, which you can find in the links in my bio. But I thought that it would be really nice to also create a video alongside that, which you can watch alongside reading your guide, or before or after. And I just thought it would be really nice to help you consolidate your understanding of your Thyroid Labs, so that then you can ask better questions at your GP. You may be able to spot some irregularities or anything that's off. However, I am going to go through just the standard hypothyroid and Hashimoto's pattern, which you find, it's the standard pattern which you find in labs. But by understanding your labs better and more deeply, this may be able to help you, realise when something might be off and something else might be going on. So this is going to be a really informal chat. I'm going to bring up my guide and walk you through it. Of course, if you have any questions, you're welcome to get in touch, sarah@yourhashimotosolution.com. And if you do have any kind of irregular patterns, then you're welcome to get in touch and we can walk through those. But for now, let's stick to the main pattern of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. So I'm going to bring up my guide, share. So yeah, I'll just show you the front. So as I said, this is available free to download by anyone, hopefully if you have Hashimoto's. And yes, it goes beyond the numbers to tell you what your Thyroid Labs are really telling you. So this, yeah, I'll just go through. There's a nice introduction, a little bit about me, what I do, and my story. I've got a nice little cheat sheet for you there so you can look quickly, but then it goes into more detail. So let's start with TSH, and that stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Now every medical professional or health support clinician will run this lab for you. So this isn't going to be something that you need to fight for. Everybody does it. So the clue is in the name, thyroid stimulating hormone. And so this is a hormone that is produced by the pituitary in the brain, and it essentially comes down to the thyroid and knocks on the door. And it tells the thyroid to produce thyroid hormones. Now, you have two thyroid hormones. One is inactive, which is called T4, thyroxine, and you have an active thyroid hormone called T3, which is triiodothyronine. And the thyroid produces around 80% of T4, which is inactive, and only around 20% T3, which is active. Now this really makes sense for the body because it helps keep your hormones and everything under control. Because if you were just converting straight to the active thyroid hormone, then that could really cause a lot of trouble in the body, speeding up things. There's no control over the speed at which your body is functioning. So it makes a lot of sense to have mostly inactive thyroid hormone, which can then circulate around the body and be activated in different organs around the body when it's needed. So the key conversion organs in your body, which you need to keep in good health, is your brain, your liver, your gut, and your kidneys. So yes, that hopefully that's helpful. We can go back to TSH. So this hormone knocks on the door and tells your body to tells your thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. If your thyroid is a little bit sluggish and underproductive, then the TSH hormone is actually going to knock louder. So you're actually going to end up with more TSH when your thyroid is sluggish and underperforming. And I think there's a really easy confusion here. People think that when they have an underactive thyroid, that hormone should be low, but it's the opposite. It goes high. Because essentially it's shouting, it's knocking, it's saying, come on, a bit like, to teenagers, get out of bed, stop being lazy, produce thyroid hormone. So really, we actually want to see TSH at the lower end of the range. If you are going hyperthyroid, which means that you have lots of thyroid hormone circulating around your body, what will happen is that TSH will be downregulated and reduced, and so it's not really knocking on the door at all because it doesn't need to. It means that there's plenty of hormone in circulation and it doesn't need to knock on the door and tell your thyroid to produce any hormone. So when you're hyperthyroid, your TSH will be very low, and when it's sluggish, it will be very high. And the number you can use that number to get an indication of how sluggish your thyroid is. Now, the loop is only between TSH and T4, the inactive thyroid hormone, and it doesn't really get impacted by the active thyroid hormone T3. So that's also another reason why doctors tend to only test TSH and T4, and we'll go into other reasons later. So what we want really for optimal thyroid stimulating hormone is we want the level to be really between 0.5 and 1.6. Now just remember that everyone is different and everyone's optimal will be slightly different. And so let's have a little look down here. So the standard medical range will be, I think they go between 0.1 and they go all the way up to 4.5, some will go to 5. That's the standard medical range and it covers around 95% of the population. However, we, nutritional therapists like to work with the optimal functional medicine range. And so I would go a lot narrower than that. And actually optimal, you really want to see your TSH between 0.5 and 1.6, or even up to 2. You could probably safely go up to 2 and still feel okay. However, most people feel well between 0.5 and 1.6. If your TSH is going above 2, then that is what we would call subclinical, where the thyroid is having to be prompted harder to produce thyroid hormone. And you're likely to start developing symptoms. If you go up into the 3s and 4s, you're very likely to start having symptoms of an underactive thyroid. If you're going beyond 5, this is definitely what would be considered an underactive thyroid. Now I need to mention the difference between hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's in a minute, but for now let's just stay on the same page that they have the same kind of activity. They are underactive. They cause an underactive thyroid. If you're going above 5, you're likely to be medicated by your GP. Now, when I was tested quite late myself, and I came back actually with a TSH of 16, and even then my GP suggested that I was slightly abnormal, but probably fine, and everyone's a bit beyond the range. And I was actually really struggling at the time. And 3 weeks later, I had another test and I was actually at 79. 79 is way off the scale. and you know, that suggests that your thyroid is really, really struggling. And that those kind of numbers are much more likely to be seen in Hashimoto's, and I'll talk more about that later. So hopefully that's helpful. If you are hypothyroid, you're going to be seeing your TSH between 0 and probably 0.5, because it will get quite low. So yes, so you can see here I've laid out low levels, optimal levels, subclinical levels, and high levels. So with a high TSH, you could also start to look at your liver and gallbladder and see whether you have any issues there. And also what we call low nitric oxide, which really affects your circulation and your body temperature. However, it should be noted that your thyroid hormone goes up and down throughout the day. It is mostly produced during the night, just before you wake up. That's when you're producing the majority of your TSH. So when you take your thyroid medication in the morning, you will have quite a large surge of both T4, and it may affect your TSH. And we can talk about thyroid hormone testing another time. So that's TSH, so hopefully that's helpful. And as I said, I try to get my clients' TSH under 2, most optimally under 1.6. So let's move on to free T4, or T4 and thyroxine. So this is the hormone that is mostly produced by your thyroid. It's inactive and needs to be converted elsewhere in the body. It is mostly converted in your liver, therefore you do need to have your liver in good health and working order, because that is where it is mostly converted into your active thyroid hormone. But it will also be converted in the gut, the brain and the kidneys, as I said. So many GPs believe that T4 is automatically converted to T3, but unfortunately that's not true. You do need certain factors to improve and increase thyroid hormone conversion. So, but let's stick to thyroxine for now. So, yeah, what I have noticed in my clients, so really the standard range for T4 is between 9 and 23. However, I think that that's very, very wide. If your T4 is around 10, 11, 9, 8, and below, then that is low and suboptimal. And I also think that if your T4 is above 19, then that is too high. And we'll talk later, but that can really indicate to me that you're struggling to convert your T4 into T3. You may also have too much medication, but I have noticed in clients who have good thyroid hormone conversion, their T4 levels tend to be a little bit lower. So, but not low, but lower. So I would say the optimal range for T4 is between 15 and 18. That's a really nice sweet spot, because it also means you have enough thyroid hormone to convert into T3. Because if your levels are below 15, then you don't have enough T4 to even convert into T3 and to get an optimal level of the optimal T3. So that's what we really want to look for. Yeah, so low levels would be below 9, and that suggests that your thyroid is not producing enough thyroid hormone in the first place. And again, I have people coming to me saying, I don't want to go on thyroid hormone. However, you need you need thyroid hormone to convert into that active thyroid hormone. And if you're in a position where your thyroid isn't producing the T4, then I would really recommend that you get that you take the thyroid hormone medication, because it physically gives you thyroid hormone that you can convert. Now, every single cell in the body requires thyroid hormone in order to function, which is why we see symptoms so widespread across the body. What was I going to say? So if you have really high levels above 19, this would indicate that either you may be on very high levels of medication, probably more likely that you are not converting your thyroid hormone into the active version. But also, if you have hyperthyroidism, then you're going to see it, above 19 into the 20s. You may also want to consider adrenal function and liver support at this stage as well. But what I would address first is your thyroid hormone conversion, because you may have that high level because it's not converting into the T3. So potentially now you can see why we don't just need TSH and T4 in a thyroid panel. We need so much more. We need more markers to get the bigger picture, and that's where your T4 doesn't give you all of the information. So if you have that T3 level, you can start to work out, are you over medicated? Are you converting well enough, or are you hypothyroid? So that's really useful. So I will say I had someone recently get in touch, and they had a really high T3, which was a really impressive T3, which you don't often see in Hashimoto's, and they had it in Hashimoto's, but they also had quite a low T4 level. And so I've asked them to go back and get checked for having hyperthyroidism or the autoimmune version, which is Graves', because potentially there's some other antibodies at play there causing high T3. So let's move on to T3. So this is the active form of your thyroid hormone, and only 20% of it gets produced by your thyroid. I will make a quick note here that this is another good reason to keep your thyroid rather than getting it removed if you can, because doctors can quite quickly jump to removing the thyroid and replacing it with just the T4 medication. But when you've got your thyroid, you will be producing some T3, which is also really, really handy. If you have your thyroid removed and you've only got T4, you've got to rely much more heavily on the conversion process. So T3 stands for triiodothyronine, and it's the active thyroid hormone which gives us our energy. It makes our gallbladder contract. It makes our gut motility move. So it's indicated in constipation. And yes, there can be lots of reasons why you don't have enough T3. One is the conversion process, which could be inhibited by not having the nutrients that you need to convert. So the 4 key nutrients that you need to convert T4 to T3 is selenium, zinc, magnesium and iron. So they're the 4 main nutrients. So if you're low in those, then your conversion will be lower. But also inflammation. Inflammation can stop the conversion process. So that's another really important reason, and another reason why we need to be working on reducing inflammation, because that's when your thyroid labs can look normal and yet you still feel awful, because your thyroid labs may even show good levels of T3, but inflammation may be blocking the uptake and the use of T3 in your cells. So let's look at the ranges. So this is the marker that quite often won't be done by your GP because they assume that it automatically happens, but it doesn't, and we do need it to see the bigger picture. So the standard range says that your T3 needs to be between 3 and 7, but if your T3 is below 5, then it's likely you will be still experiencing symptoms such as fatigue, maybe constipation, low energy, feeling cold, maybe brain fog as well, poor memory and concentration. So really, if we look at the optimal range, we need to be getting this between 5 and 7. Now, I almost never see this in my clients when they first get tested. Some do have relatively good conversion, between 4 and 5, but many people are between 3 and 4, and that's too low. So this, if your levels are below 4, then this could indicate the need for those minerals, the selenium, zinc, magnesium and iron. And you may also want to consider your gallbladder and bile. If your levels are between 4 and 5, then you might want to check whether you're producing enough T4. Check that you actually have enough T4 to be converted into T3. And if your levels are above 7, then this is very much a hypothyroid picture. Your body will be producing a lot of T3, and again, you may need specific nutrients to support that process. Also, as you can see here, we've got a picture here of hair. If you're experiencing hair loss, then you may also want to look at your T4 to T3 conversion. Right, so moving on, let's look at anti-TPO, which is the hallmark marker for Hashimoto's. There are other markers for Hashimoto's, but this is the main one. So this is an antibody, and it's called anti-thyroid peroxidase. Now this antibody attacks the enzyme that produces thyroid hormone. So when this enzyme is being attacked and destroyed, it means that your body cannot produce thyroid hormone, and therefore you end up with low levels of thyroid hormone, and you start to see an underactive thyroid picture. So Hashimoto's is the autoimmune version of an underactive thyroid. So if you have hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid without any antibodies, if they come back negative, then it means you have hypothyroidism, and that will relate back to a thyroid issue. It may also mean that you don't have the nutrients to produce thyroid hormone. But if you have positive, if you're positive for thyroid antibodies, mainly the anti-TPO, then this would suggest that you have Hashimoto's, and that is an autoimmune condition. So this means the body is attacking certain proteins in your thyroid. This one is the protein in the enzyme and is stopping thyroid hormone production. So there's a lot of debate over the ranges and what they should be, but generally in the UK, if your antibodies come above 35, then that is the point at which your GP would diagnose you with Hashimoto's. Now, they do this often because this is at the point at which they will medicate you. Some laboratories will say you need to be over 60, and this is why it's a little bit confusing, because laboratories have different levels, and you might ask yourself, why does someone have Hashimoto's at 35 or 25, and why does someone else have Hashimoto's at 60? Well, really, in my opinion, it's really not about whether you have Hashimoto's or not. It's the point at which they think that you need to be medicated and treated as if you have Hashimoto's, or even hypothyroidism. Really, when your antibodies start showing up, and they will do this long before your other labs go out of range, this is the point at which genetically you have gone autoimmune, and once antibodies start showing up, this is the autoimmune process in progress. So you can have antibodies at 9 and you can start having symptoms. You can have them at 20, 30, and you can have them in the hundreds and the thousands. I would say some laboratories now are saying they're sort of diagnosing at 25, and it really actually depends on how aggressive the attack is, because these antibodies are simply tags for the immune system. They don't actually do the attacking and the destroying themselves. What they do is they tag onto a thyroid cell, and they alert the immune system and say, this doesn't look like self, this looks foreign, or it's damaged and it needs to be destroyed and removed. So then what happens is that it alerts immune cells in the body to come along and to destroy that cell. So it's your antibodies are just a tag, but the attack that happens on the thyroid can either be very, very aggressive and strong, or it can be not very aggressive. So you could have low levels of thyroid antibodies, but you could have a very aggressive immune system, and you could have a lot of symptoms and feel terrible with quite low levels of thyroid antibodies. Conversely, you can also have very high levels of thyroid antibodies and not feel as unwell as somebody in a different situation to you. So it's not a marker of the progression or how aggressive the condition is. However, the more antibodies you have, they tend to accumulate over time. But essentially they're tags for the immune system. So really, I would say that, if you have anything above 4, this is the autoimmune process in action. And most clients that I've seen start having symptoms above 9, sometimes 15, 20, 25, and then anything higher, and they start to get themselves a diagnosis. But really the optimal range is really 0, because we shouldn't really have any antibodies at all, or potentially less than 4, because it also matters at the range at which your lab will identify antibodies. But really we need to be seeing negative come up. If you see low levels of antibodies, but no real not very high levels, and you feel fine, then you may just want to keep an eye on it and keep coming back and measuring them every year. So really we want to see 0, and that's it. I would, because they show up long before your thyroid markers go out of range, it really needs to be, is a very important test, and it really needs to be done as early on as possible, because that's when you can start to catch it and realise whether you have a thyroid issue or an immune system issue. And the sooner you pick it up, the sooner you can take action and reverse your condition, and potentially avoid the need for thyroid medication. Another quick note on the medication side is that not only do we need thyroid hormone to support the function of our body, but it also actually helps regulate inflammation and our immune system. So if we take that thyroid hormone, we can start to help regulate the immune system and regulate inflammation. And that is why it can take people 6 weeks to feel better, once they start taking thyroxine. Because you would think, well, why does it take 6 weeks? Why are you not seeing an immediate effect? And that's because it has to work on the inflammation and the immune system before you start seeing progress. And also you need to work on getting your levels up. So another antibody that is associated with Hashimoto's is called anti-TG or anti-thyroglobulin. And this refers to antibodies that target thyroglobulin. It's a crucial protein produced by the thyroid gland, and it's responsible for the synthesis and storage of thyroid hormones, both T4 and T3. So thyroglobulin, so what I also meant to say was it's not the hallmark marker for Hashimoto's, because this antibody can show up in other autoimmune conditions. Therefore, it cannot be used to diagnose Hashimoto's by itself. It always needs anti-TPO first and foremost or alongside. It can't be used to look at Hashimoto's alone, but it is useful because it can fluctuate with iodine intake. And iodine is a really important nutrient for the thyroid and in Hashimoto's as well. And too much iodine is very much a Goldilocks nutrient, and too much iodine can cause inflammation and for your antibodies to go up. And we can equally have inflammation and issues if we don't have enough iodine. Elevated levels of this antibody can suggest an imbalance or a deficiency, within a deficiency or excess in iodine. So it's quite useful to get to help us sort of know. Although I would always recommend that you test your iodine as well before you go, looking at how much you really need to supplement. So yes, it can be this antibody is usually seen in Hashimoto's and Graves', which is the autoimmune version of hypothyroidism, but it can also be seen in other autoimmune conditions like celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and type 1 diabetes. So let's just look at the standard range, and that suggests anything over 115 is an issue, but really when we think about it, the optimal range is 0. So we just need to really work on getting this as low as possible. So moving on to some really important nutrients that we need for thyroid health, but also the immune system. So vitamin D, I'm sure you've all heard about vitamin D. So it's actually a hormone, and it's an anti-inflammatory hormone. It really helps us regulate inflammation and the immune system, and we need to make sure that it's at an optimal level if you have Hashimoto's. Research has also shown that vitamin D can help us lower our antibodies as well. So deficient, you're going to be seeing levels below 25. And if you have Hashimoto's, you really, really need to get it up above that. Insufficient is still between 25 and 50, although in Hashimoto's, it's definitely insufficient. We need to get above adequate, and we need to get into optimal, which is above 75 for the healthy population. But really in autoimmunity, we want our vitamin D up around 95 to 120, even 150. This is where we want our vitamin D levels, because that is at that point is really going to support your immune system, inflammation, and help bring down your thyroid antibodies. So I should quickly note on here that we do also need magnesium to activate vitamin D3. So if you're taking lots of vitamin D3 and it doesn't seem to be, you're not getting your levels up, it doesn't seem to be having any kind of impact, then I would look at magnesium supplementation as the next step to see if that helps. B12 is also really helpful. unfortunately at your GP you won't get the active version, you're just going to get serum B12. And while, you know, for free, that's, you know, a really good start, I would say we still want the active form of B12 because we want to know how much is getting into your cells. So B12 is going to really help with your nervous system, your energy, your mood. It's really important. It helps with cognitive function, regulating inflammation, and supporting your neurotransmitters. So it also contributes to gut health, absorption, and methylation, and it's vital for DNA synthesis and detoxification. So it's really, really, you know, supportive across the body. And that's why I suggest that all my Hashimoto clients eat meat and fish and eggs if they can tolerate them, because you need to have, you know, they're nutrient dense and you need your B12. But if your B12 levels are low, then we need to start thinking about your gut health and absorption. We need to look at the diet first, but you know, if you have a diet high in B12, then we really need to look at your digestion and your absorption. But I'll save that for another day. So yeah, the optimal range is between 37.5 and 150. This is the serum, optimal serum B12 via your GP. We really need to see it above 500 and between 900. So that's not the active version, but that's a really good place to start, and just to check that it's over 500. If it's under that, then we need to start looking into your digestion and your absorption. So ferritin, this is the iron storage marker for iron, and it's not a specific marker for your iron levels, but it's the best indicator of iron deficiency anemia. So it's really helpful, but it can go up and down for other reasons. So iron is really, really important for thyroid health. It's really important for all levels of thyroid hormone production. So the production of thyroid hormone, the transport of thyroid hormone, and the conversion of thyroid hormone. You know, research has shown that an iron deficiency can contribute to the development and progression of autoimmune diseases because it helps regulate the immune system as well. So, but as I was saying, it's not a specific marker. So you can have very high levels of ferritin when there's inflammation in the body, and also when you have very low levels of ferritin in the body as well. So it's not always just an indicator of your iron, but it's really, really useful. We really need to be seeing, you know, so the GP ranges for iron can go very, very low, and they're not acceptable at all. But you will, I think they have started to raise them now to 30, but anything under 30 is considered low. Suboptimal is between 30 and 50. You can still experience some thyroid symptoms in that range, and anything under 50 will put you at a higher risk of hair loss. So we really want to be getting your ferritin over 50 to prevent hair loss. But the optimal range of ferritin is between 70 and 150 for women. If it's going above 150, then we want to start thinking about inflammation or even an infection. So the body can draw iron out of the circulation and into storage when there is a bacterial infection, because bacteria can feed on iron and use it to replicate. So you might also want to think about, is there an infection? And again, if you have very low levels, then there could also be signs of inflammation. And that's all I'm going to go through on iron today. I mean, I could do a whole video on iron, to be honest. Folate is another one that's really, really important for DNA synthesis, cell growth, red blood cell formation, but it can also contribute to your energy as well. And it plays a key role in methylation, which is a process that's crucial for detoxification, neurotransmitters, immune function, but also the process of how it processes your B vitamins. So, you can get good levels of folate from leafy green vegetables, and low levels of folate could indicate things like poor diet, gut malabsorption, could also indicate a common problem in Hashimoto's, which is SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, celiac disease, or simply an imbalance in your gut bacteria. But I would encourage you to download the free guide so that you can read more. And so let's just look at the standard range. So it says above 4 to avoid deficiency. Do take care to look at the measurement so that you're getting that right. So this one, if we're going to do, so the optimal range is really between 10 and 20, or 22 to 45 nmol. So you could, just pay attention to the measurement, because you could make a mistake there. But really we need our levels above 20 ng. And there isn't really, you can go quite high before, it becomes unsafe. Although obviously we can always get too high, and if there is, usually high folate comes from excessive supplementation or a poor conversion due to genetic factors. Now, CRP is a really useful marker that you can get on a thyroid panel. This stands for C-reactive protein, and it's produced by the liver in the response to inflammation in the body. So it's quite a nice marker to check whether you have high levels of inflammation. It's often used to see whether you have an infection or inflammation caused by an infection. So if you're getting it measured and you have a cold, flu, or any other kind of virus, and your CRP is very high, just check in with yourself and think, am I feeling unwell? Do I have an infection at the moment? Because that could give you maybe not an accurate indication of your general inflammation levels, and you may want to wait until you've gotten over your cold or flu to check it again. So really we want this marker to be as low as possible, which is below 1. When you start getting, between 1 and 3, it's low risk, but it is showing some level of inflammation. But when we start seeing it go above 3, this is really when it's becoming suboptimal and showing a moderate risk. Between 3 and 10, and anything above 10 is really showing signs of systemic inflammation. So that is that's the end of my Thyroid Labs run through. I just also I have got one last marker on the cheat sheet, which I thought I would run through with you. I haven't done a page here, but I have included HbA1c, which is a marker of your blood sugar, and it can give you an indication of what your blood sugar level has been like over the past 3 months. And really we want to see that below 34. Suboptimal is between 35 and 41. But if you are starting to see an HbA1c of between 42 and 47, this is indicative of pre-diabetes. But if you're seeing your levels even at 40 or 41, then you really need to be working on your blood sugar management and working to reduce your blood sugar levels. If it's more than 48, then that would be classed as diabetic. So I recommend that all of my clients get their HbA1c checked, because not only can blood sugar imbalances drive inflammation, they can also drive up thyroid antibodies, and women with Hashimoto's tend to struggle a little bit more with their blood sugar balance. So that's it for today. I hope you found that useful. Do download the guide from the links in my bio. Leave a comment in in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you thought of that, how you found it, whether you found that helpful. And if you did, then I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel. I will be making more videos for Hashimoto's, and of course check out the other links in my bio, and of course you can email me, Sarah at yourhashimotosolution.com. Okay, well that's it for today, and yeah, I'll see you soon. All right then.